In this session, we're really going to just scratch the surface on coastal communities and some of the unique wildfire challenges and threats due to their proximity to both urban and natural environments. In addition, how there can be far-reaching consequences on coastal areas impacting delicate coastal ecosystems, water quality, water infrastructure, as well as debris flows and sedimentation, sometimes causing mudslides. This session will explore strategies for mitigating impacts on coastal waters and water infrastructure. So we can just get started with you, Mandy.
Okay, thank you to all of you who stuck around. I know it's a long day, it's been a long 2 days, but as Tegan said, I'm gonna be talking a bit about a research project that we've been doing looking at wildfire impacts on coastal water quality. I'll just reiterate that something we all know already, that wildfires are increasing in their severity and frequency. This is not just a California problem, it's a global problem. And in our project, we really want to understand what that means for coastal draining watersheds. So coastal draining watersheds are links between the land and the sea through mechanisms like river runoff. And what we focus in on is to think about how changes in river runoff, things like the nutrient content or sediment content, what does that mean for marine organisms, especially in the nearshore environment? In this talk, I'm going to focus on some of the tools that we use and present how they might be useful to some of you all here. The first one I'll talk about is watershed modeling, which typically is a series of numerical calculations that parameterizes on-the-ground processes. In my talk, when I am referring to the watershed model, what I'm talking about is using a specific model that I'll point out later to look at stream flows and sediment loads coming off of a coastal draining watershed that enter into the ocean. Another technique or tool that one might use would be satellite remote sensing. These are satellites that are in space, orbiting the planet, and acquiring Earth surface observations. And from these observations, we can derive a variety of different parameters. The ones I'll be focusing on are turbidity and kelp-related data sets, but there are many more that are relevant to fire, like active burn, burn scar, and so on. Today I'm going to focus on the Wildfire. This was a case study that we looked at on the far, I guess that's your far left. You can see a time series of satellite image acquisitions. The one in April is before the fire, and if you're looking at the coast, it's like this nice dark blue that's representative of clear waters, not very turbid, not a lot of sediment. In the middle panel, you see a November 10th 2018 acquisition, and that's during the Woolsey fire. You could see the smoke in the image. And then down below it, you see just post-fire, November 30th. In that coastal area, the water now has these blues and browns and tans, and that's showing you an idea of how much sediment was coming off of the land surface and entering the coast. So that's the kind of case study that we're interested to think about. So the graph that's on your right, this is some results from our study, and not to get too bogged down in the weeds, but looking at the bottom part of the graph, these colored lines that are black, yellow, orange, red, these are watershed modeling outputs where we were looking at sediment fluxes. And what I want to highlight today is that the model that we used was really great at giving us a sense of magnitude of how much sediment was coming off of the land and entering into the ocean. And the x-axis, I should mention, is time. It's the years 2018 to 2020. Along the top, you're looking in a blue dashed line with blue dots. That's coastal turbidity data derived from satellite remote sensing. And what that data set did was give us a constraint on the timing of sediment pulses entering into the ocean. Because we got satellite acquisitions that are instantaneous snapshots, we, in this case, were fortunate to get an acquisition that occurred in late November of 2018, shortly after the fire. And you can see that's the big peak kind of right after the Woolsey Fire dotted line. So together what we found is that using remote sensing and watershed modeling tools gave us this better, bigger picture idea of what sediment is doing pre and post fire. And just to give you a sense of how much sediment and stream flow increased, which you might be able to tell from the graph, some of our main takeaways were that stream flows increased by up to 4.6 times above baseline conditions in the post-fire period. For sediment loads, we saw increases up to 1.3 times higher than normal, and then some corroborating studies done by Sierra et al. In 2022 found that fecal indicator bacteria also increased in this same time period, with total coliform being about 9 times higher and Enterococcus bacteria up to 53 times higher. And that, I think, speaks to not just the sediment and maybe marine ecology impacts, but also to public health impacts that could be associated. Lastly, I'll just wrap up to highlight the watershed model that we used in the study. It's called SWAT. I'm not going to give you a lot of details for time, but just for the slide deck later, you can take a look. This is a watershed model that is semi-open and publicly available that you can apply to whatever watershed of interest that you have that may have burned. And to help with hopefully getting started and using this tool, NASA has freely available tutorials on YouTube. They're called RSET trainings, and I've put a little infographic here. I encourage you, if you're interested in using more of these tools and thinking about getting your hands on with some demos, to explore the RSET trainings. Last thing I'll wrap up with is to say that moving forward, we're tying this research with changes in stream flow, sediment loads, and bacteria to think about the coastal impacts, particularly with respect to kelp. This time series, I don't know if it's not playing, so never mind. But there's a time series on the slide just showing kelp declines following the Woolsey fire. So we're thinking about how fire impacts can cascade down to marine ecology, in particular kelp. So for time, I will stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Hi guys, sorry about that. I'm Sophia Barron. I'm a water resources engineer with Stantec. That is not a picture of me. That is my graduate advisor, Dr. Alicia Kinoshita. She unfortunately could not be here, so I'm filling in for her. Dr. Alicia Kinoshita is a civil associate professor at San Diego State University, and she's also the director of undergraduate research and creative activities at SDSU. So we are a part of the Disturbance Hydrology Lab at San Diego State. So here are some pictures of our current lab members. We are a diverse group of students. We consist of both undergraduate, graduate students. Some of us work full-time, some of us are full-time students. So there is a wide range of experience within our group, which I think is really beneficial for everyone to learn from one another. We also have a wide range of collaborators and agencies that support us. You can see a list of them on the screen. We are supported by NASA, by CAWFC, by the State Water Board, SWRP, a number of different agencies. I want to give a special shout out to COAST, the CSU Council on Ocean Affairs, Science and Technology. They actually helped fund my own research, so just want to give them a quick shout out. So some of the research themes and methods that our lab does, we primarily focus on wildfires. So we look at different recovery processes dealing with vegetation, hydrology, geomorphology, as well as water. We look at anthropogenic and urban pollution sources, so water quality after wildfires. We try to have an integrative framework within our lab and our research. So we look at different societal concerns associated with post-fire processes. We look at habitat restoration and restoration policies, as well as habitat resilience under anthropogenic stressors. So I was asked to summarize my master's thesis into one slide, so I will try to do my best for you guys. I wish I would have collaborated with Mandy sooner because I also studied the Woolsey Fire. So we looked at surface water quality after the fire. I was in a very unique position where I was already working in the industry. So I was working full-time with a consulting firm while doing my graduate research part-time. And I was very fortunate to have done the water quality compliance monitoring with my former company while going to grad school. And I thought, this is a great idea to use my work and combine it with my graduate research because I knew Professor Kinoshita specializes in wildfires. So what better way to kind of coincide those two things? So we looked at water quality response before and after the fire. So the watersheds affected by the Woolsey Fire fall mostly under LA County. The LA County stormwater permit mandates these coordinated integrated monitoring programs. So we would go out 3 times a year during the wet season and monitor 2 dry events per year. So those programs started in 2015, 2016. So we had a few years of data before the fire, a few years of data after the fire. So we were able to compare water quality before and after fire, which was really great. We were interested in 4 different pollutants. So the watersheds that we looked at, they are subject to total maximum daily loads, so pretty strict water quality requirements. So for those areas, we looked at the bacteria E. coli, total suspended solids, and the nutrients total nitrogen and total phosphorus. And we found that all of the pollutants that we looked at within the first couple storms after fire, they were at their highest concentrations out of the entire years that we monitor them for all sites and for all pollutants, just kind of showing that the fire, probably contributed to the water quality degradation. And so we also wanted to look at some factors to see if they played a role in pollutant contamination. So we looked at precipitation, land cover, and soil burn severity. We found that land cover and precipitation were not really a driver in pollution, but soil burn severity was. The more severe the burn, the higher the pollutant concentration. So that was an important finding. Some opportunities, I'm not going to call it challenges, but opportunities for, better solutions and data, as we want longer data sets, more data. The more data, the better. These monitoring programs only look at 3 storms per year, so we're not capturing every single storm within the year, and we only look at 2 dry events per year. So we're only getting a small snapshot of what's happening after fire in these water bodies. So being able to have a more continuous monitoring, looking at more storms and more what's happening during the dry season, we would have a better idea of what's happening in the water bodies after fire. So that is a data gap that we want to help fill in the future, is looking at what's happening on a longer time scale. So, and with that, that's it for me.
Hello, my name's Heidi Nelke. I'm with Atkins Realis. I have 25 years experience in the emergency management field, including a bachelor's in environmental science and a master's in emergency management. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Sadie Waddington, for being a dear friend and partner in resilience and inviting me here today. And thank you, Coastal Quest. I have to say, my 25 years of experience working with emergency managers and engineers, this is the most inclusive audience I've ever presented for. So thank you, Coastal Quest, for making that a part of your mission. A little bit about Atkins Realis. We are an engineering firm. We provide mapping and modeling to all sorts of clients, but my team specifically to FEMA and the federal government. We provide risk mapping services for over 20 years and partnering with FEMA. I'm going to talk about the Thomas Fire and how we supported the local community here, as well as partnered with CAWFC and FEMA to provide tools for this community in order to build more resilient community in the future. So this event started, as you all probably know, as a fire and debris flow. It started as a fire, but coastal communities have one of the most challenging areas to deal with because they have to deal with many, many hazards all at the same time. So it's really great to think about fire in an isolated instance, but around here you can't. There's earthquakes, there's landslides, there's tsunamis, there's fire. So we really encourage coastal communities to look at things holistically and all hazards. So we were busy making our maps like we do every day for FEMA when all of this was going down. We generally take about 2 to 4 years to finalize and qualify all of our maps for FEMA. There's public comment involvement. There's lots and lots of steps and layers to ensure that the products that we provide are accurate and high quality. But in this case, it really wasn't reasonable. The community didn't have time, and the needs were so great, and everyone was very desperate. So we started within 2 months, and our entire project took a total of 6 months, which is, as I said, unheard of for us. We worked with CAWFC, the county, and FEMA to identify the needs for the county. They were the leaders of all of these decisions. We were just a tool to support them, and that we wanted to help them prepare for the future instantly, right? So they are recovering still from this disaster. They're actually still responding, and we're trying to help them identify how to start rebuilding. So what we created here was a recovery map. This is not a debris flow map. It is not a water model. It's not any of these things. All it is showing the current conditions, the change conditions, and how this community can use this new reality to move forward. And here were our results. So we were easily able to identify all of these new water surface elevations in the blue, the new flood areas in the light blue, the depth of grids, and then the newer hazard boundaries. So this whole area, complete change condition. How does an agency give out building permits and all these details to move forward without this information? So it's been really helpful to the county to move forward. The other thing I want to say about that is it took political will. There were a lot of people that were saying, we need to build back, we need to build back, we need to get going, we're in a rush. These stakeholders took the time to not only talk about the impacts and still responding, but how to build back better. And just in closing, I really encourage all of you to look at any hazard in a holistic approach. We are really uncomfortable with the one hazard. It's really looking at all of it together is the only way to truly protect a community. And then I just wanted to really show this hazard life cycle. Most of us in the emergency management field know this life cycle for our entire careers, but what's changing about this is it's accelerating. It's accelerating every year, and the impacts are getting greater and more integrated. So what we look at is just asking you to partner with us to be agile in our resilience and to be constantly reiterating this circle, not just stopping after you've done what you consider resilience, but moving forward continually. Thank you.
All right, I'm the last speaker, and then we'll have some questions, and I promise I'm going to keep time. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got into our wildfire resilience work, and it started back in 2020 when we were organizing a coastal resilience conference for the state with UC Irvine, and 2021 was the date of the conference. And what we heard from leadership in OPC and different agencies and researchers was that there was really a need for some understanding and dialogue and have a panel on this topic. And at the time, there really wasn't a lot of research published. There wasn't a lot of practitioners working on this issue. But we put something together, and simultaneously, we started working in 2020 in Ventura County, and we're working with some partners in the Santa Clara River and coast and thinking about resilience. And what happened was kind of simultaneously was, this need and desire to lift up a collaborative around understanding the science of, impacts of wildfire on water infrastructure and water quality, and make management recommendations and start some pilot solution projects in the region. And so we established this collaborative with a multi-sectorial group of utilities and local agencies and NGOs and federal agencies and state agencies, and started to have a discussion around what and how would you begin to understand the impacts, truly understand them, what data and research is missing to inform the management and decision-making process, and what are some of the recommendations that could be moved forward, and treatments, et cetera. And so we had a number of meetings, and we outlined some priority management questions with the group. We then mapped out through an extensive literature review, really trying to understand, what research is out there, what data is being collected through stormwater permits, through the swamp system, through the water boards, and what is missing, and realize that there's really an opportunity to pilot with, a group like we had set up through this collaborative, sharing of data and information, that there's actually a lot of data and information being collected, and that just some targeted additional indicators that could be agreed upon to collect data would be really useful pre and post fire. Some of the long-term monitoring that Sophia mentioned being, really critical, and adding a few more points in the temporal cycle to those data sets that would really help inform management moving forward and some of the solutions. And we also then did a survey of practitioners in the region around what their priorities are, and what they really talked about was that they wanted information. They wanted to really have that information to inform their management actions, a water utility, like when do I close my dam, when do I open, what are the debris flows like, and really be coordinating and sharing this information more. They're not doing it right now. So actually merging data sets, sharing information, talking about it, and then coordinating management actions. And we also talked about, how would you do this cross-jurisdictional work? How do you share those data? We did some surveys on the governance around that and what that would look like. And we also kind of outlined, what were some of the initial management recommendations that they wanted to be starting to think about and moving forward and testing and developing further as they collect more data. So at this point, we've also simultaneously, since we're thinking about this as a pilot, how do we start to get buy-in at the state scale, having discussions with the Water Quality Monitoring Council and the swamp system, which is a statewide monitoring, and integrate some of that data collection into it, and working with other key partners to kind of move that forward. And at this point, we are looking for, and have a number of proposals out, looking to continue the collaborative, pilot the design of the kind of sharing of data, and implementing the data collection and management measures in those pilots. So lots of opportunity and need. It is a holistic approach, and it's something that is important for, especially to our coastal marine ecosystems, but also for drinking water and other benefits that water creates. So thank you. So maybe we can just hear from each of you about some of what you think are the challenges and barriers of moving some of the research agenda and management solutions forward in this area. Do you want to start, Mandy?
Sure, I'll start. I
I think that, at least on our side, that we're so research focused, one of our big challenges is building interdisciplinary teams. When we're talking about these projects that have stakeholder engagement and end user applications, if these people are not included at the start of project concept and design and execution, then the ultimate results are not going to be as useful to the public and to managers as it could be. So we struggle with finding collaborators that are interagency, interdisciplinary, and I guess I'll use this as an opportunity to say that the work I presented today is just one case study of several fire-impacted watersheds that we'll be looking at for our project, and we are actively interested in building collaborations with anybody who is interested in being a part of this type of work and helping us build data sets that are going to be useful to end users.
I would say funding and time. I think with kind of lack of funding and time constraints, we're not able to research as much as we could. And so with that, there's a lot of data gaps. And if we don't have informed analyses and informed science, then we can't really have an informed policy. So I think, with increased resources, we're able to increase our data and our knowledge and hopefully better inform policy.
Oh, okay. I would say data paralysis. We collect so much data, we have so much data that sometimes we can't move forward. We need to take a moment and move forward and then reiterate with the next group of data. But that's one challenge we have.
Yeah, I think that was something that our group talked about was everyone had their own data sets, but they weren't sharing them and they were in different formats. So really some investment in how to merge those data sets and look at them over a time period, and then maybe adding a few key indicators really strategically could be really helpful, is what the group that we were working with talked about.
Yeah, I'd just like to add open source data would be really helpful for everybody. So yeah, thank you.
So my next question is, what are the impacts fires having on coastal and ocean ecosystem and resources and assets, and how do we educate the public and decision makers about this?
Well, I'll just kind of review the points that we found for the Woolsey fire specifically, is that there were very clear increases in post-fire stream flows, sediment loads, and fecal indicator bacteria that were well above baseline conditions. This is just an example of what we found for one study. We're hoping, again, to expand this to others, and I know that Sophia also found some interesting stuff that she can tell you about again. But for educating or informing, I think it starts with, for us, our collaborators and our students. As I talked about just now with the building interdisciplinary teams, we found that the more we collaborate externally outside of academia, outside of just NASA in general, when we are reaching out and working with people from all sorts of different agencies, we're able to spread awareness simply because more people know what we're doing, and then they're able to take that back to their meetings and their collaborations, and we start to build outward and end up in a room like this where we get to talk about what we do to all sorts of a variety of interests and backgrounds. And then for the student aspect, we really like to engage students at the undergrad and graduate level and get them thinking about these topics and issues from basically the start of their careers, so that we are working toward building a workforce that once they're out there have already thought about these topics, engaged with them, and are kind of ready to enter into the spaces and continue all the work that we've all kind of been doing here.
Yeah, I agree with you. We studied very similar things. We can clearly see that the fire is impacting the waterways, and the Woolsey fire reached the coast, so these waterways are carrying pollution all the way to the ocean. And Mandy and I both found increased fecal indicator bacteria, which is a human health risk. So all these pollutants are not only harming the ecosystems, the waterways, the surrounding areas, but also to humans, beach recreators that, are wanting to enjoy the day. It's a human health risk, it's an ecosystem risk. So, everything is kind of getting worse with water quality right after fire. So it's definitely affecting coastal communities. With respect to educating, I think showing more research, more of these studies that are continuously saying that water quality is getting worse, and then bringing that back to regulators, to consulting firms, to agencies, and, educating them, showing them the data, showing them the science. Hopefully we're better able to inform people with increased data and research, which will hopefully better inform policy.
I would just say, like, with our stakeholders, it's using that. Someone said natural intelligence is a real cornerstone for the future development, and not just re-engineering the way that we have done over and over again. We're really at a precipice point for all of us changing that mindset. And
I would just add, so I was speaking with Carol Carius yesterday, who spoke. She spoke at our collaborative about some of the work they were supporting in Colorado, and she was saying that they have been doing some monitoring and have some time series of impacts, and actually had really seen the cost on cleaning the water in the drinking water supply. And that was actually something that the decision makers actually really paid attention to, and the utilities were paying attention to. And so there was incentive to actually be putting in some management measures to protect the watershed and those assets because they had that data and because they understood the cost of cleaning the water because of the fecal matter and all these other sediments that are in the water as well. Are there any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Hi, this question is for Sophia. How did you analyze your data, and did you use any statistics?
Yeah, I use a couple different statistical methods. So I use the change point analysis, which basically detects any shifts in the mean pollutant concentration, so if there's any significant changes. And then I use a simple ANOVA variance analysis. So just, some simple statistics to see if there's any significant changes pre and post fire.
Do we have another question?
Thank you. Other than, doing all the things we've been learning today to stop fires, these big mega fires from causing all this damage to the ocean ecosystem, is there anything that a way to mitigate this so this doesn't, what can a land manager do right after a fire that's going to stop this? Do you know, or is this still in, is there research on this?
I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. That's what we're all here for, is to try to mitigate the impacts of fire. Fire is going to happen. We want fire to happen. How do we mitigate the impacts? We build stronger, or we build more resilient.
I'll add, just from the research perspective of our project, that's an open question. We want to have a better understanding of what the impacts are with flows and sediments and maybe other contaminants, so that when we have a better characterization of how a watershed might behave, then we can move on to thinking about what could the management side do.
Yeah, I don't have any current solutions, but I will say that it is important, because in our data, we found it was more than a year for pollutants to return kind of back to pre-fire levels. So it did take a while, so it is important to figure out how to mitigate sooner.
I mean, we did talk about some ways in which we wanted to evaluate and test different solutions and experiment with that. And I think that there is a lot of unknowns, but I mean, like any asset you want to protect, are there ways to protect? You want to stop the fire, obviously, and so how can you do that around the watershed and be focusing on protecting the resources there in a way that maybe prevents kind of debris flowing in, and then also questions around what are the contaminants that are being utilized that are most harmful, and some of those we're not testing at all. We don't even know of them. And I think one of the things that we also were hypothesizing and thinking about, and the water boards wanted us to kind of look into more, was, also contaminants from, not just retardants, but also from debris from homes that burned, right? So there's a lot of things that are going in there, and there could be some techniques to be preventing some of that. So, but all of it is a new area.
Thank you. I guess it's a whole nother conference on this. Thank you.
But there's not a lot of people doing work on it. I think that's what we discovered, and that's the challenge. Yeah. The opportunity. Yes. Some questions in the back. Yeah.
Hi, thanks very much. The increase in TSS and some of the other pollutants, those seem, I can certainly understand the source of those. Do you have thoughts on the source of your increase in enterococcus and fecal? I mean, is it associated with damaged septic systems, or why do you think you saw such a large increase in the bacteria?
That is a great question. And so the increase in the fecal indicator bacteria was found in a study by Marisol Sierra et al. So I'm citing her research on this, but from my discussions with Marisol, they concluded that for sourcing of that bacteria and trying to figure out sourcing and pathways, there needed to be future work considering development and land use change in the burned area and watershed, because their study was not able to identify, a clear source or trace it back, but that they had some suspicions that it would be or might be connected to some human development operations or land use change.
Yeah, ours was also a little inconclusive. It was a mystery. But the sites that had the highest hits of fecal indicator bacteria were at the coast, which was a little interesting, not further in the watershed. And it was in areas that had septic systems. So that was one possibility, but it was still inconclusive. So.
There's another question. Yeah.
It's not so much a question, but just a point of information. So the Colorado Wildfire Conference, one of the presenters was a person named Madeline McDonald, who also serves on the Federal Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission, and she also works for Denver Water and Power. And with their large catastrophic wildland fires that they had there, had to develop a lot of mitigation procedures. And so just for you and then also for the rest of the audience, that's a good point of information to be able to make contact with. And then the final report is out. They're there in DC today. I wasn't able to attend, but you can read it and it'll go into it in summary, but you can also contact all the folks individually for more information.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot of new developments starting in this area, which is important. Any other questions?
Thanks. I'll piggyback on your comment real quickly and say that actually I have a resource that outlines several remediation methods that you might be interested in. One of them being fungal remediation, which is a new thing to help rehabilitate soils. So come talk to me. Also, question for y'all is, any interest or plans to look at the effects on groundwater post-fire? How does pollutant transport and or infiltration change, possibly?
There are no plans for my project, but it is something that has been brought up by some colleagues, and I think there's interest there, but I don't know of any upcoming or ongoing work on it.
Same, yeah, I'm no longer a graduate student, but yeah, we did not look at groundwater, but another professor did suggest looking at that, so there could be potential to research a bit more.
We just identified it as a gap. Yeah.
So y'all talked a lot about fire as a hazard, right? And like when fire comes through, what the impacts are. And I'm wondering if any of you know about the impacts of treatment and like pre pre-fire treatment work in coastal communities and the impacts on water quality or quantity or other factors of like the other things we're trying to do?
Yeah, so that's something that not many people have done any research on. And so I think that's what we actually have been proposing, to develop some pilots in this collaboration in Ventura County to test some treatments. But to our knowledge, there hasn't been any. Maybe in Colorado, there's been a couple. Carol had told us about some things that they have done, but it hasn't been documented the way that we might need. And so I think that there's an opportunity there to do that. And, you know, if you have thoughts on that, it would be great to talk about it. Any other questions? All right. Great. Well, we finished our session a little bit early, so thank you so much for a great discussion.